hitting rock bottom isn't the end. In fact, if you know how to look for it, the absolute lowest point is the exact moment a really powerful new cycle of energy quietly begins.
Yeah, it's the ultimate paradox, really.
Hmm.
We're so conditioned to fear the bottom, to view it as this total system failure.
Right, like everything is just broken.
Exactly. But when things look completely desolate on the surface, that is actually the exact environment required for a true reboot to take hold.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are unpacking a framework that honestly completely flips how you might think about failure, burnout, and starting over.
It really does. It changes the whole perspective.
Yeah, and for this session, we're pulling from a really fascinating perspective tailored just for you. We're tapping into this ancient wisdom that's been modernized in the app Why Way Why Why Way Out, which, by the way, you can actually download right now on the Apple App Store.
Highly recommend checking it out.
Totally. And we're also using its companion book, The Mind Key to the I Ching, which you can find on Amazon.
And it's this brilliant translation of these really enduring principles for the modern world. And our mission today is to take the core concept of return or recovery from this framework and basically apply it as a highly practical guide for your life.
Which we all need at some point, let's be real.
Oh, absolutely. We're going to figure out exactly how you can navigate the aftermath of, say, a massive failure, a total burnout, or even a market crash without, accidentally sabotaging your own fragile new beginnings.
Okay, so let's unpack this, because before we can talk about climbing out of the valley, we kind of need to understand what the bottom actually looks like, right?
Yeah.
And the visual imagery used in this framework to describe recovery is just, it's incredible. It paints this picture of two distinct forces interacting.
Yeah, what's really fascinating here is how it uses nature to explain our internal state. So imagine two layers. On the top layer, you have the symbol for earth. And then on the bottom layer, buried underneath, you have the symbol for thunder.
Earth on top, thunder on the bottom. Okay, so help me visualize that, because when I think of thunder, I immediately think of this massive, loud storm splitting the sky, right?
Yeah, that is the usual association. But context is everything here. The upper earth layer represents an environment of total stillness.
Like nothing moving at all.
Exactly. Picture a landscape in the dead of winter. The soil is heavy, it's covered in thick snow, completely silent. There is zero resistance, no movement on the surface. It's just this state of absolute quiet acceptance.
Okay, I can see that. So where does the thunder come in?
Well, the thunder in this case is trapped deep underground. It's not a deafening boom. It actually represents a tiny, almost microscopic spark of life waking up at the absolute lowest depth.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's the very first seed stirring under the frozen soil. So on the surface, nothing has changed. But deep down, a real driving force is just, switched on.
I really love that visual. It makes so much sense when you apply it to a real life scenario. It's like when you're recovering from massive professional burnout, you've hit a wall, your calendar is completely cleared out, you are doing absolutely nothing on a Tuesday afternoon. That's the heavy winter earth.
Yes, perfectly said.
But then, deep down, you suddenly feel this tiny, random urge to just, I don't know, read a fiction book or start a really tiny hobby again. That's the thunder. It's not a loud boom. It's a whisper. It's a microscopic spark.
And this raises a really important question for you, the listener, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you handle that whisper? Because if you handle it wrong, you lose it entirely.
Oh, yeah. You can easily just snuff it out.
Exactly. And the framework gives us 3 critical mindsets for hitting restart successfully. So the first is trusting the natural cycle. You don't have to force the upswing.
Just like you don't have to force spring to follow winter.
Right. Recovery happens naturally if you step back and just allow it.
You don't have to aggressively dig into the dirt and pull the seed upward to make it grow.
If you do that, you'll just rip the roots apart. You'll destroy it.
Right.
The second mindset is a frictionless restart. Because the environment is so quiet, your movements need to be really smooth. You want to avoid triggering any massive resistance or, making aggressive moves that disrupt that necessary calm.
Keep it low key.
Exactly. And the third, which is maybe the most vital mindset, is protecting the fragile core. At this stage, your only job is to accumulate energy, not expend it.
See, here's where it gets really interesting to me, because that goes against literally everything we are taught today.
Oh, totally. It completely pushes back on modern culture.
Modern hustle culture just screams at us to bounce back instantly. You fail a project at work and you're expected to pitch a massive new initiative the next morning.
Yeah.
Or you burn out And you immediately sign up for a marathon just to prove to everyone and yourself, honestly, that you're totally fine.
Yeah, we have this demand for immediate visible expansion. We are terrified of the winter phase. But forcing that fragile, tiny spark into a massive bonfire too quickly is, honestly, the primary way people extinguish their own recovery.
Because it's just too much, too fast.
Right. Think about the physics of a fire. If you only have a tiny ember and you throw a massive, heavy log on top of it just to prove how big your fire is, you just smother it.
You choke it out.
Exactly. You simply don't have the fuel for a bonfire yet. You have to nurture the spark with small, manageable pieces of kindling.
Okay, so how do we actually nurture it? We know what the spark feels like, that tiny urge to try again. But let's talk about the inner game. How does a person navigate those first delicate steps of internal recovery? Because the framework outlines a very specific progression, right? Starting with our immediate instincts.
Right. So the very first hurdle in recovery is catching yourself before you fall back into the old pattern that caused the burnout in the first place.
Okay.
It represents the ultimate instinct. It's about snapping out of a bad habit or catching a mistake right as it begins before it causes any real damage. And the mechanism that makes this work, and this is the hard part, is doing it with zero ego and zero defensive justification.
Okay, let me give you a slice of life scenario. Tell me if this fits. This sounds exactly like furiously typing out a toxic, angry email to your boss or, I don't know, maybe your partner.
Oh, yeah. We've all been there.
You're 4 paragraphs in, your heart rate is way up, you're fuming, your finger is literally hovering over the send button,
Yeah.
but you catch yourself right before clicking it. And instead of sending it or saving it in your drafts to obsessively edit later, you just highlight the whole thing and hit delete.
Yes.
No ego, no muttered, well, they deserved it, just immediate course correction. You step back from the ledge.
That captures the exact friction of this stage perfectly. And the reason it takes so much psychological effort to delete that draft is because of sunk cost in biology.
Right, you've already invested the time.
Exactly. Your brain has already invested 20 minutes of time and a massive surge of dopamine and adrenaline into crafting that anger. Your ego desperately wants the payoff of hitting send.
It wants to win the argument.
But the framework tells us that if you can catch that deviation early and swallow the ego, the energy required to fix it is minimal. I mean, there's no massive HR fallout to clean up tomorrow.
Yeah, no messy apologies.
You just seamlessly return to baseline. It is the most efficient loop of self-repair possible.
But let's be real. We don't always catch our mistakes before we hit send. Sometimes the damage is just done, or we're just fundamentally exhausted. And that brings up the next phase of this internal recovery, which focuses heavily on resting. This is the power of low power mode.
Right. So if that first instinct is a sharp, immediate correction, this next phase is a quiet, deliberate healing. It's the conscious decision to stop the urge to overachieve.
Which is so hard for so many people.
It is. But your body, or your mind, has taken a hit. The spark of recovery is there, but you have to allow the biological and emotional system to heal. It's a purposeful, low-energy state.
I think people struggle with this because resting feels like failing. We attach so much guilt to it.
Oh, our modern brains absolutely fight low-power mode. We equate stillness with laziness. But in this framework, resting is actually an active defense mechanism against unnecessary consumption.
I like that.
You are purposefully closing background apps in your brain to save battery for the core operating system.
It's giving yourself permission to just exist for a minute, without having to prove your productivity to anyone. But eventually you do have to start moving again. And this is where I want to push back a little bit.
Okay, let's hear it.
The framework talks about the messy reality of trying to establish a new routine. It basically says, progress isn't linear and you will inevitably relapse. So wait, is it okay if I start a new gym routine, do great for a week, and then spend the entire weekend eating pizza on the couch?
Right.
Isn't that just failing? Because if I'm eating the pizza, I'm not recovering.
It's a completely natural assumption, and it's precisely where most people abandon their recovery entirely.
Yeah.
But the text explicitly validates the scenario you just described. It refers to this phase as a frequent return.
Frequent return, okay.
Yeah, the framework expects us to wobble. You are trying to establish a new upward trajectory while fighting the massive gravitational pull of your old habits and your old environment.
So it's naturally going to be bumpy.
Friction is a mathematical certainty.
So the pizza on the couch isn't the end of the world.
The danger isn't the relapse itself. The danger is the shame spiral that follows the relapse. That is what consumes your energy.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
You don't beat yourself up over the pizza. You don't decide that because you ate the pizza, you are fundamentally flawed, you lack discipline, and you should therefore just cancel your gym membership.
Which is what we usually do.
Exactly. The framework teaches that as long as the overall trajectory points toward recovery, the micro failures are completely irrelevant. You just quietly, without any dramatic fanfare or self-flagellation, go back to the gym on Monday.
Right.
That constant, resilient recalibration is what eventually breaks the old cycle.
I love that. The wobble is actually built into the system. It takes so much pressure off being perfect. Okay, so we've nurtured that internal spark. We've managed our impulses. We've allowed ourselves to rest on low power mode, and we've survived the wobbles without spiraling into shame.
Yep, the inner game is solid.
But eventually, this new energy has to interact with the outside world. We have to, leave the house. And the problem is, the office, our social circles, the broader environment might still be completely stuck in the old broken cycle. How does this quiet spark survive in a noisy, toxic environment?
This is where we transition from the inner game to the outer game. And the framework addresses this beautifully by describing a solitary kind of recovery.
Solitary, meaning alone.
Yes. It's the specific moment you look around and realize the crowd around you, maybe your team, your industry, or even your friend group, is heading in completely the wrong direction.
And what do you do? Because my instinct, honestly, if I see everyone marching off a cliff, is to stand in front of them and shout at everyone to turn around. We have a moral obligation to fix broken systems, don't we? Isn't walking away just cowardice?
If it feels like cowardice to the ego, sure.
Mm.
But think about the physics of the spark we just discussed. If you stand in front of a stampede and yell, you will expend all that precious energy you just spent weeks saving up.
You'll just get trampled.
You will likely be trampled anyway. You do not have the energy to save everyone yet. Instead, the framework advises a quiet exit. You recognize the collective madness or the toxic inertia, and you simply drop out.
Just walk away.
You don't make a scene.
Yeah.
You don't try to be a martyr. You just step off the path.
This sounds a lot like quiet quitting, a toxic group chat, or maybe a doomed corporate project. You don't stand on a desk and scream, "You're all wrong, I'm leaving."
Right, no grand speeches.
You don't write a 10-page manifesto to the CEO on your way out the door explaining how flawed the company culture is. You just slowly back out of the room, Homer Simpson style. You just let the bushes consume you.
The Homer Simpson visual is a great way to picture it. But let's dig into the psychology of why this works. What's fascinating here is the profound internal confidence it requires to execute that quiet exit.
Oh, because it's hard not to justify yourself.
Exactly.
Yes.
Society dictates that we need consensus, that we need to convince others we are right to validate our own choices. But this ancient perspective argues that when you finally reconnect with your core truth, you simply don't need an audience.
Wow.
The need to perform, the need to forcefully change a broken system that really doesn't want to change, it just vanishes. You walk away because staying is exhausting and your new spark needs oxygen, not a debate.
That is so freeing. So what happens when that spark actually gains enough momentum to reach the top? Say you aren't the one backing into the bushes. Say you are the one running the environment. How does a leader or a massive organization experience recovery?
That is a crucial dynamic. The framework describes this as the ultimate acceptance from the top. So imagine a massive organization or even just an individual who holds a lot of power and a massive ego.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
True recovery at this level happens when they drop the PR spin, they dismantle all their carefully constructed defensive walls, and they accept the raw, unvarnished truth coming from the bottom up.
So what does this actually look like in practice? Give me your real-world scenario of a leader doing this structurally.
All right, picture a CEO who is handed a devastating internal report. The data shows a fundamental flaw in their flagship product, or perhaps a toxic culture that is driving away their best talent.
A nightmare scenario for a CEO.
Right. And the standard ego-driven reaction in the corporate world is to preserve the armor at all costs. The leader will shoot the messenger, bury the data, or, launch a complex, highly publicized initiative that merely masks the failure rather than actually addressing it.
Right, yeah. They hire a consulting firm to tell them what they want to hear and put out a press release about synergy.
Exactly the opposite of what the framework suggests. A leader who is truly aligned with recovery acts like dry, cracked soil absorbing a heavy rain.
Just soaking it in.
There is a complete lack of defensiveness. Structurally, this means they don't posture. They don't demand their communications team soften the blow. They take the raw, ugly reality from the bottom and allow it to penetrate the highest levels of the structure without retribution.
That takes a lot of guts.
True strength at the top is the ability to absorb a massive reset without shattering. It's the ultimate form of being grounded.
That is incredibly rare to see. It's like real power doesn't need to shout that it's powerful. It just listens. And it creates an environment where that tiny spark of truth can actually survive the journey from the bottom of the company to the boardroom.
Exactly.
But this brings us to the dark side of this whole concept. We've seen how to successfully ride the wave of recovery from the bottom all the way to the top by nurturing the spark. But what happens if you completely ignore the changing seasons? What if you miss the cycle entirely?
That brings us to the final, most dangerous phase outlined in the text. It describes a state of total confusion. And to put it bluntly, it is an absolute disaster. Yeah. This represents being completely disconnected from the reality of your environment. The season has changed, the spark of new life has already happened, the world has moved on, but you are stuck in the past.
Just completely in denial.
You use aggressive, destructive force precisely at the moment you should be resting, observing, and adapting. The ancient text warns that this leads to 10 years of ruin.
Wait, 10 years?
It's a metaphor for a massive cycle of time, but practically it means missing an entire macro cycle in your industry or your personal life. It means you've caused such profound structural damage to yourself or your organization that you are taken off the board completely. You don't just lose a turn, you lose a decade.
So is this like Blockbuster Video? Think about it, the industry season changed. The new spark was digital streaming.
Yep.
Netflix was that tiny thunder waking up underground. But instead of recognizing that reality, stripping away their ego and adapting, Blockbuster doubled down on the old winner.
Yeah, absolutely did.
They leaned into late fees, massive physical store expansions, and selling candy at the register. They completely misread the environment and ultimately destroyed themselves.
Blockbusters is a textbook example of this failure. The tragedy here isn't just that they failed to innovate. It's the sheer amount of energy they wasted. They deployed their entire corporate army in the exact wrong direction.
Right.
They exhausted all their resources fighting against the inevitable future.
It's tragic because they had the energy, they had the capital, they just used it to dig their own grave faster. Why do executives do that? Why do they refuse to adapt when the spark is right in front of them?
It comes down to structural inertia and past success blinding them to current reality. The biggest disasters don't actually happen in the dead of winter when everyone is hunkered down and cautious.
Okay, when do they happen?
The biggest disasters happen when the season has already shifted to a blazing summer, but you stubbornly put on a heavy insulated snowsuit and try to trudge through the heat because you refuse to read the signs.
Oh, man.
You collapse from heat exhaustion, not because you lack strength, but because you dedicated all your strength to fighting the reality of the environment.
Wow. Wearing a snowsuit into the middle of summer. That visual of just sweating, exhausted, refusing to take the coat off because this is how we've always done it, that is going to stick with me.
It's a powerful warning.
So let's pull all of this together for now. We started this journey at the absolute bottom, deep in the frozen earth, where everything felt completely still.
And we discovered that true recovery doesn't start with a massive bang or a PR campaign. It starts as a quiet, almost imperceptible whisper underground.
Right. And to protect that whisper, we need immediate, ego-free course correction. Highlighting and deleting the angry email before the sunk cost fallacy makes us click send.
Yeah, swallowing the ego.
We need the permission to rest, fighting the modern guilt of running on low power mode. We need the grace to handle our inevitable wobbles, knowing that eating pizza on the couch doesn't erase the progress of the gym if we just keep returning to the baseline without a shame spiral.
And as we take that internal recovery outward, we need the profound confidence to quietly walk away from the toxic crowd when they're heading the wrong way, backing into the bushes, rather than screaming into the void.
Love the bushes strategy.
And if we happen to be the ones in charge, we need the structural humility to accept raw, unvarnished truth without building defensive walls.
If we can manage to do all that, we avoid the 10-year disaster of fighting the turning tide. We avoid wearing the snowsuit in summer.
We align our internal spark with the natural rhythm of the environment, allowing recovery to happen with minimal friction.
It is such a powerful, grounded way to look at starting over. And a quick reminder, if you want to explore these perspective-shifting frameworks for yourself, you can download the YYO app right now on the Apple App Store, or grab the companion book, The Mind Key to the I Ching, on Amazon.
Yeah, it's absolutely packed with these kinds of deep structural insights into how we operate. It really serves as a practical toolkit for navigating the complexities of modern life using some of the most enduring observational wisdom ever recorded.
So we've walked through the entire cycle of recovery, but I want to leave you with one final thought. The text notes that once this tiny spark of recovery is stabilized and reaches the top, the cycle doesn't just stop.
Right, it keeps moving.
It immediately transitions into the very next phase, a concept known as innocence or the unexpected.
Yes, that tiny, fragile spark you nurtured so carefully in the dark is about to hit the open air. It transforms into a raw, almost unpolished instinct, charging headfirst into a highly complex, unforgiving world.
Exactly. So my question for you to mull over is this. You've successfully nurtured your tiny spark through the heavy winter. You've protected it from the hustle culture, the toxic environments, and your own ego. But once that fragile flame suddenly catches the wind and becomes a roaring fire of raw, unfiltered ambition, how will you keep it from burning down the house?
That is the ultimate challenge. The exact same energy that saved you at the bottom can easily consume you at the top if you forget where it came from.
Keep your eyes open for that spark. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.